it's me, Mike, with HPDS. This video will be a reading and studying of Exodus chapter 4. Exodus chapter 4. Before I get started, I'll go ahead and recite the Lord's Prayer as I normally do. So, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. All right, so I'd go ahead and ask that you please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future chapter by chapter Bible study. In Exodus 4, let me go ahead. I've got some notes here that I like to show off. So let me go ahead and get this set up properly. All right, in Exodus 4, we're going to come across the story of Moses and Aaron. So we've already kind of read about Aaron. We've been reading about Moses in the previous chapters. We're going to see what really comes on a little bit more between them. So what we're going to look for in this chapter is verses 1 through 9. We're going to see that the Lord gives signs to Moses. So there's going to be some signs there given to Moses. And then from verses 10 through 17, the Lord appoints Aaron as Moses' spokesman. And from verses 18 through 23, we'll see that Moses leaves for Egypt. And in verses 24 through 26, we're going to see a quick story of that the Lord comes to kill Moses. And so that's going to be an interesting story that we run across. And in verses 27 through 29, Moses and Aaron are going to gather the elders of Israel. So this is a moment that has been gathering, that has been coming forth from the previous few chapters we've come across. So if you remember in Exodus 3, what did we come across in Exodus 3? In Exodus 3 was the story of Moses and the burning bush. So if you remember that we saw that in chapter 3 of Exodus, the angel of the Lord first appeared to Moses early on, and then the Lord started sending Moses to Pharaoh. He was already telling him what he was going to need to do. He was going to need to go to Pharaoh. He was going to need to do all of that and so forth. And then Moses, in the middle of chapter 3, we saw that Moses kind of got to asking. He wanted to know what the name of God. He wanted to know which God he was speaking to, and that's what he was really doing. He was wanting to say, "Well, which God are you?" He wasn't really even sure. He was already getting lost in that Egyptian philosophies of pagan gods, and the Lord was really upset, and he tells them, "I am who I am. Go tell him that I am sent you." And then we also saw that we read that the Lord instructs Moses to make a request to Pharaoh. So he's telling him what he was going to tell him. So he sends him to Pharaoh, and he's going to tell him, when you get there, you're going to say this. And then he makes a prophecy saying, he said that when he does, he's not going to, when you make this request to leave, he remember the request was to leave, to go worship to the Lord. He says when you do that, he's not gonna let you do that. He's not gonna be willing, not without a strong hand or something along those lines. So what I'll go ahead and do now is I'll go ahead and just read through Exodus 4 now, and then I'll go back to it line by line and see what the Holy Spirit brings to this understanding, to this video. So let me go ahead and get set up. And we will read through Exodus 4. Let's see, Exodus 4. And I gotta make sure, there you go. Okay, and it reads, "And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said unto him, What is that in thine hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from before it. And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thine hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand, and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, Put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe also these two signs, neither hearken unto thy voice, that thou shalt take of the water of the river, and pour it upon the dry land, and the water which thou takest out of the river shall become blood upon the dry land. And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech, and of a slow tongue. And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. And he said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well, and also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee. And when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. And thou shalt speak unto him, and put words in his mouth. And I will be with thy mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you what ye shall do. And he shall be thy spokesman unto the people, and he shall be, even he shall be to thee instead of a mouth, and thou shalt be to him instead of God. And thou shalt take this rod in thine hand, wherewith thou shalt do signs. And Moses went and returned to Jethro his father-in-law, and said unto him, Let me go, I pray thee, and return unto my brethren which are in Egypt, and see whether they be yet alive. And Jethro said to Moses, Go in peace. And the Lord said unto Moses in Midian, Go, return into Egypt, for all the men are dead which sought thy life. And Moses took his wife and his sons, and set them upon an ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. And the Lord said unto Moses, When thou goest to return into Egypt, see that thou do all these wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand, but I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say unto thee, Let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. And it came to pass by the way in the inn that the Lord met him, and sought to kill him. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone, and cut off the foreskin of her son, and cast it at his feet, and said, Surely a bloody husband art thou to me. So he let him go. Then she said, A bloody husband thou art, because of the circumcision. And the Lord said to Aaron, Go into the wilderness to meet Moses. And he went, and met him in the mount of God, and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord who had sent him, and all the signs which he had commanded him. And Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel. And Aaron spake all the words which the Lord had spoken unto Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and they had looked upon their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshipped. All right, so that was Exodus 4 in its entirety. So that was Exodus 4. So once again, I'll do as I normally do to understand these chapters in this book is I will review once again what it is, the points, the bulletin points. And remember, what we're coming across here is that we're going to see that the Lord gave signs to Moses. So the beginning from verses 1 through 9, the Lord gave signs to Moses. Remember, one of them was his hand kind of was leprous, was one of the big ones right there, and he came out and it was leprous. But then in verses 10 through 17, we read that the Lord appoints Aaron as Moses' spokesman. So that was going to be the other thing. Remember, he gets really upset with him. Moses tells him, I'm not really eloquent. I've never been eloquent. Send somebody else. And so God gets really upset with them, and he says, look, here comes your brother Aaron. Isn't he good enough? Now you're going to speak through him, and you're going to be like God to him. So God, again, is showing himself and his nature and how he is to these people, especially Moses, who has no confidence here. He's got God at his back right here. God is giving him a direct order, and Moses is real hesitant to carry it all out. And then from we're gonna see. Remember in verses 18 through 23, though, Moses left for Egypt. So he finally goes, and he went went to talk to Jethro, his father-in-law, and he tells him, I'm gonna go back to Egypt and see, whether my brethren are still alive. He says something along those lines. And then in verses 24 through 26, there was that strange story, and I'll explain that as we get through it, that the Lord came to kill him. He came to kill Moses. And so his wife had to give a circumcision to their son because their son, for some reason, wasn't circumcised. And here was God to kill Moses. God was showing him He was really showing him the severity of the situation that Moses was in. He was in a pretty severe situation, and he doesn't really know who his God is. He doesn't know anything about his God. He doesn't really know what's going on. He doesn't even. He thinks there's many gods. He's possibly thinking there's many gods, and so that's why he's wondering what God this God is. And he hasn't circumcised his son, even though he knows he's a Hebrew. He knows that these are his people. So for some reason he's not carrying out their traditions, and that's a real big. It's so severe that the Lord had come to kill him. And so once the wife realized what was going on, she was the one that had to circumcise the son so that Moses wouldn't be killed, and so that they wouldn't lose their everything. Because when she realized what was going on, she just had to circumcise the kid. And then in verses 27 through 29, we saw that Moses and Aaron gathered the elders of Israel. So they finally go up there, and they did all their little signs, and all the people believed him, and they realized, oh look, God has shown up, and He's heard our affliction. And so everybody was very surprised, and so forth. So once again, I'll go through it, and I'll read it line by line, and we'll see just what the Holy Spirit brings into the understanding. What more comes from understanding here. So let's see. Okay, let me make sure I got this. And let's see. So it says, and Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. Okay, so remember in verses 1 through 9, what are we reading through? We're reading that the Lord gave signs to Moses. And so right here, why is he having to give him signs in the first place? And we're seeing that Moses is he's got a real lack of faith here. They don't we're seeing already that God has taken this line of Abraham, like under his wing. He's made a great promise with them. He's going to make kings out of these people, he has said. They're very important people. And here Moses, he doesn't even really, they don't really even have so much faith. Like he's already saying, look, no one's going to believe me, God. No one's going to believe that you came and spoke to me. That's how far away from God these people had already become. And so So God tells him, well, look, I'm going to go ahead and here's the signs. That's why he needs to give him some signs. So he says, God tells him, the Lord said unto him, what is that in thine hand? And Moses tells him, I got a rod over here. And God tells him, all right, cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground. So Moses cast it on the ground and it became a serpent. So this rod, this piece of stick, this piece of wood, this stick, um, became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. So this is that first sign that he gives him, is this rod. It's a special rod, and this rod he's going to use throughout his lifetime. We're going to see this rod come up, but it becomes a serpent, and it's such a real serpent that Moses has to flee from it. So this is a pretty serious snake here, pretty serious serpent. It's a pretty serious sign. And then, of course, Lord says unto Moses, he has to tell him, put forth thine hand and take it by that tail. So he has to put forth his hand and he catches it. So God is telling him, the Lord is telling Moses, look, pick it up. So he throws it on the ground, it becomes a serpent. Then it's so scary, Moses has to run from it. Lord tells him, hey, don't be worried about it, pick it up. And so he picks it back up, he takes it by the tail, and it just turns right back into a rod. So it's like it's a sign. It's something that is literally, Moses knows it to be impossible. This is something that is impossible. Nonetheless, he has seen it, God has given it to him, and he has done it. It's proof of God for him. This is something serious, and Moses was lucky enough to see it right here. And he goes, and God tells them that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee. So here's a sign, and he goes, and then here God gives him even more signs. He says, and the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thine hand into thy bosom. So first he gives him this rod, and now he's telling him, put your hand into like your bosom here. So he puts his hand probably like into his shirt of some sort, and he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, the hand was leprous as snow. So he probably kind of put it into his little coat or something, his covering, and then when he pulled it out, his hand was as leprous as snow. So his hand was probably real ugly looking, kind of like leprous. So it was peeling. Who knows what his hand looked like? It was probably pretty severe, I imagine. Uh, for Moses to see this and kind of understand that this, like I said, there's a great severity that he's been put into, that he really doesn't understand the situation that he's being placed into. And so many thousands of years later, here we are still reading about Moses, and Moses wasn't even he had no idea that this was going to be the case. He was just but this is he was very lost. He didn't know what was going on. And so this is God showing him the severity. First is his rod that turns into a real scary serpent, and now he's seen his own hand turning leprous as snow. And so, I'm sure that probably, if that happened to you, he'd probably be a little freaked out too, a little scared, seeing what was going on. But God tells him, put thine hand into thy bosom again. So he puts it back in, and he plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. So it was back to normal. So once again, Moses was probably a little concerned when he saw his hand like that, but then God was reassuring him and showing him again, like, look, this is just a sign. Don't be too worried. Even the snake, the serpent, was real scary, but God tells him, pick it up. Just pick it up. Don't, just pick it up. It was just a rod. Don't you remember? It was just a rod. Over here, he's telling him, look, don't worry. Look, your hand's fine. It looks all bad. Now it looks all fine. It's back to normal. And so God tells him, and if it shall come, so these are two really great signs that he gives Moses, and he tells them, and he's actually telling, go show these signs. You're going to show these signs to the other elders. And that's why it says, going into verse 8, and it shall come to pass, if they will not receive thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. So the Lord is telling them, look, if they don't believe the first sign, you got two signs. This is gonna be you're gonna be pretty. They're gonna have to believe this is God coming to them. The Lord is here. I've heard your distress calls, and I've come to collect you. And it shall come to pass, if they will not also believe these two signs, neither hearken unto thy voice, that thou shalt take of the water of the river and pour it upon the dry land, and the water which thou takest out of the river shall become blood upon the dry land. So he's telling them, and if you notice, he doesn't really actually show him this particular sign. He just tells them about this sign. He's saying, look, you got two signs to go take to the elders for them to believe. You got your rod that turns into a serpent, and you got your hand that you can show turns into a crazy, ugly, nasty hand, and then comes back to normal. This is God showing you these are the two signs that the Lord has given you, and it's not just because these are just two random signs. These are two very important signs, and these are the signs that they're getting that God has called them. So they need to really take into consideration what these signs are, and what's going on with them and why it's like this. But because then he tells them the third one is, and if they don't believe these two signs or listen to my voice, then you're going to take water of the river and you're going to pour it on the dry land, and that water is going to turn to blood. So this is getting really, like I said, very serious, very scary. These signs that he's getting are pretty severe. Like I said, you've got a serpent, which is your staff, which is, it's supposed to be a real elegant symbol, like a real symbol of, older age, and a symbol of perhaps political power, or just, the patriarchal power. This staff is, it's a rod. It's a symbol of some sort, and it's turning into a snake. And so a serpent, nonetheless. It's turning into a serpent. And if you remember all the way back in Genesis, what was it? Genesis 4. So yeah, let's go back to, I think it's Genesis 4, when we saw that, oh no, it's Genesis 3. Genesis 3 was the fall, and we see that there was the serpent that caused them to fall. Remember, it was a serpent that got Adam and Eve to eat of that garden of the tree, the one that where they weren't supposed to. And so, if you remember, he does get the serpent is, look at, and the Lord God said unto the serpent, this is verse 14 of Genesis 3. Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast. Upon the belly thou shalt go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. So there's enmity here, and let's go ahead and search Google for a definition of enmity. The state or feeling of being actively opposed or hostile to someone or something. So we've got a serpent here. Let's go back to Exodus 4. Here in verse, that's this other sign. Like I said, this sign, the very first one is this rod turning into a serpent, which we all know now is a very cursed creature. This is a cursed creature, and it's not only that, but man, and so people, the man, which is what Moses is. These people are really they've got a lot of enmity between the serpent and people like Moses. So Moses is getting this real cursed creature, this real creature that they've got enmity with, and it's his symbol of power over here. So it's kind of a strange, like I said, it's a very strange sign. It's a very dire sign, a very ominous sign of what's to come. Some very cursed stuff going on. And look at what Moses is having to deal with, this serpent right here in his rod, as his power, as his symbol, of his status symbol over here. And then the second one is his own hand is turning leprous. I mean, his own hand. This is Moses. I mean, this would be scary. I mean, how many people, people out there that may know about their own, probably have disabilities, or have lost a hand, or have crippled their hands, or have other perhaps deformities with their hand, or have lost their hands in accidents. In particular, people that once had hands and then lost their hands. That's really what people would understand the most, because that's what he's doing. Is he's putting his hand into his little bosom, into his shirt, and he's pulling out, and it was leprous as snow. So that's another very dire sign. Like, it's very scary. It's like Moses is having to deal with the serpent, and look, his own hand is becoming dirty and leprous and cursed. So just by touching this, like, that's what God is showing him, these signs. Um, and God is telling them, and if they don't believe these two signs, and if they don't understand how serious the matter is, then you're going to give them another sign, and water is going to turn into blood. And that's a very scary thought here, that we might see water turning into blood, especially out of the river. And it is something that we're going to see in the book of Exodus, when God comes upon the Pharaoh, and he deals very, very, he's going to show, like I said, he's showing everybody his power. In the book of Exodus, he's showing these people his power, and he is showing them his strength, and he is showing them the severity of breaking his commandments, and breaking breaking his laws that he's about to set forth. And remember, he hasn't quite set forth laws. So going back into, like I said, getting back into Genesis 4 again, about a whole book ago, same chapter, we saw the story of Cain and Abel. And Cain killed Abel. So you remember right here, Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. That's verse 8 of chapter 4 of Genesis. Genesis 4:8, Cain kills Abel. And so once again, if we continue reading through the story of Genesis 4 and this whole situation when Cain killed Abel, we saw that God did not do anything to Cain. He, in fact, put a mark on him and said that if anybody kills Cain, then he's going to kill them. He's going to avenge Cain 7 times over. And so that's where it is right here, verse 15 of Genesis 4. The Lord saith unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him 7-fold. And the Lord shall set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. So he made it obvious that nobody can kill Cain. And even though he had murdered his own brother, and this is something that we're going to see, that God hasn't quite given the law yet. And he's made mention, and I'm trying to remember where he made mention, but he did make mention that that anybody who sheds blood, their blood will be required of them. And I want to say that was also back in after the flood. It was around the time of the flood. So we know that whoever spills blood, their blood will be required of them. So we even remember Moses did kill a man way back in Exodus 2, a couple of chapters ago. In Exodus 2, Moses kills one of the Egyptians. So we already know that Moses' life is required of him. God is saying that Moses must die eventually. Of course, he hasn't quite given them the law yet. And he will do it in this book. He will do it through Moses, but as of yet, he has not fully established the law with them. And he is saying that these people don't yet know what the severity of their actions are yet. Even though Moses himself has murdered a man, he doesn't know how serious it is to murder a man. He doesn't really know. That's what God is understanding, that in this time in history, these people do not necessarily know and understand the full consequences of their action, especially when it comes to these great sins such as murder. They don't really know that God hates this stuff. God hates murder, and he doesn't like it at all. But Moses, he doesn't really know yet. He doesn't understand yet. But let's see. And so this was Genesis. That's really the what I want to get at, to what these signs and how severe it is. But of course, moving on from verses 10 through 17, we see that the Lord is going to appoint Aaron as Moses' spokesperson, and he's gonna do it because basically he's really upset with Moses. Like I said, they don't understand it. Moses is acting kind of like somebody that is in a position of power, and he doesn't know how bad the situation is, and he's telling them, "Look, God, I'm not really eloquent. Never, even since you've spoken to me, I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue." So he's really defiant. Well, not defiant, but he's real. Like I said, he's real. Um, he's not really into this job. I'm not very comfortable with this. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not a good. I got bad speech and a slow tongue. And God's telling him, look, who made man's mouth? And who maketh you dumb or deaf or the seeing or the blind? Have I not the Lord? So you're seeing that Moses here does not fully understand the Lord's power and what the Lord has done for humanity and for the world and for people. He's saying, look, who makes man's mouth? I make him. Isn't it me, the Lord? And you're over here talking to the Lord, aren't you? And why are you being so why are you pushing back on this? You're giving me any kind of excuse. If you're slow of speech, God says, I make your speech. That was me that did that. Or who, what makes you think that I won't make you a great speaker, and so forth. So that's why even he tells him, now therefore go, and I will be thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. So he's really putting it to him, like Moses is not really believing the power of God, power of the Lord. He's not really seeing the significance of the position he's being placed into. Um, and God is telling him, just go ahead, go, and I will be your mouth, and I'll teach you what to say. Um, and that's when Moses comes back and he's sword, oh my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. So he's saying, just send somebody else, God. Please just send somebody else. I pray you. Just send somebody else. Don't send me. I'm not right. I came up with one excuse. I don't know. I don't have any more excuses. Just pick somebody else. And like I said, God is angry. Here he is. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well, and also behold, he cometh forth to meet thee. And when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. So like I said, so here we see him starting. He goes, fine then, I'm just going to appoint Aaron as your spokesman. Here's your brother, Aaron the Levite. He's your brother. And you're going to speak unto him, and you're going to put words in his mouth, and I will be with thy mouth and your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. So he's saying, no, I'm still going to use you, Moses. It's not your choice. Moses is over here thinking that he's got a choice in this whole situation. And really, when he was given to him, he should have been glad and happy that God has called and come to choose him. And instead, Moses is real hesitant, I don't want to do it, God. I don't, pick someone else. I'm kind of I'm not really a good speaker. I'm kind of bad with words and speaking. And send somebody else. And God is saying, look, no, Moses, I've come to you. You're the one that I've chosen. I've already picked you. So you should be happy, but instead, now I'm gonna make it a little rough for you, and I'm gonna make your brother Aaron over here. He's gonna be your spokesman, and now you're gonna talk to him, and he's gonna be the person out in front of everybody, and but you're still gonna be really important to him. You're gonna be like God to him, so you're gonna have to see things the way I'm seeing things, and Moses is trying to see things through his point of view, and Lord is telling him, nope, I'm going to make you see it my way. You're going to see everything my way, and you're going to be like God to your brother Aaron, and I'm going to teach you what to say. So you're going to see what it is like to be me to someone else, is what God is telling him here. He's I'm going to make you like me to him. I'm going to make you like God to your brother. And that's what he tells him. And he's going to be your spokesperson, and you shall be to him instead of God. So it's going to be you're going to be put into a very powerful position, Moses. None of your choice. You should be happy. Instead, you're not. Oh well. God is pushing forward anyway. That's what God is telling him. And so that's why at the end of verse 17 we see this, and thou shalt take this rod in thine hand, wherewith thou shalt do signs. And he's saying, and you're going to take this rod in your hand, and you're going to go do the signs. And that's just how it is. And so then we move into verses 18 through 23, where we see that Moses leaves for Egypt. That's where he's finally going to get out to Egypt. So we see in verse 18, and Moses went to and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and he said to him, let me go, I pray thee, and return unto my brethren which are in Egypt, and see whether yet they be alive. And so he says, yeah, all right, go in peace. So it's time. It's about that time. I want to go see how my people are doing. And it's okay with Jethro. He tells him, go in peace. So in verse 19, the Lord said unto Moses, in Midian, go, returning to Egypt, for all the men are dead which sought thy life. So he's in Midian, and he's telling him, go ahead and return to Egypt, because everybody's dead. So that's going to be a time where I need to go ahead and pick up this picture here and see if I've got the right picture or not. Let's see if I've got any of these pictures. They're in Egypt right now. If you remember, Goshen's kind of right here on this part of this river. It's kind of real in here, north, this side of Memphis, right where my mouse is. And the Midianites, so he's over here in Midia. If you remember, he came up here when he fled from this Goshen area all the way up to where this side of the Red Sea right here, where the Midianites are. So that's exactly where he's at. And that's where God tells him, go, return into Egypt. And he's telling him that all the people that sought, remember, everybody that wanted his life are dead now. All the people that knew about his murders. So God is really giving him a pass, like I said, even though they haven't really, even though he's going to require his life of him, just like he did for Cain. And he gave Cain that mark, telling him, nobody better kill this guy or you're going to be avenged. He's going to be avenged sevenfold, remember. But nonetheless, he still did require Cain's life. That's what was going to happen. God was using it for different purposes, and he was going to show them some things. And that's really what's going on. And so he tells them, go ahead, and he takes his son. Moses took his wife and his sons, and he set them upon an ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. So here they go. And the Lord said unto Moses, when thou goest to return into Egypt, see that thou do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand. But I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. So once again, where he's telling him, make sure that you show him these signs. You're going to need to show him these signs with the rod turning into a serpent and your hand turning into that leprous, crazy looking hand, and then being restored again. Make sure you do that. But here he is, he's telling them, once again, he's bringing back to him that prophecy that he made there at the end of Exodus 3, and that prophecy was that you're gonna make that request to go out into the wilderness 3 days to sacrifice to your Lord, and he's gonna say no, and he's gonna be real. His heart's gonna be real hard about it. It's gonna need some mighty wonders and some mighty signs to convince him otherwise. So he's reminding him right there. And he's telling him, God is telling Moses, and thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. So God is pointing out that Israel is my son. He's as my firstborn. So it's a very serious situation here that Israel is the firstborn of the Lord. And we're going to see something very special about the firstborns coming up in this chapter. And like I said, remember in Genesis 3, if you go through some of those videos, the firstborn, I make mention that the firstborn was always the one supposed to be getting the inheritance. even though coming up with the son of coming up with that line of Abraham, we saw several times where the firstborn was not really the one that came up with the inheritance and with the blessings. We remember seeing that, reading that Joseph stole the blessing from his older brother, the firstborn Esau, if you remember that, and then and so forth. But here God is telling them, and He's bringing along the importance of the firstborn. And even though, that line wasn't, the inheritance didn't always go to the firstborn, He's saying that the firstborn is very special. And in Exodus and in further chapters, we're going to see kind of why that is. And we're going to read kind of into some important things moving into Exodus, but especially about regarding the firstborn and making sacrifices in our sacrifices and stuff. But and he tells them, make sure you tell Pharaoh that this is very important, that Israel is my firstborn, and you need to tell him that, let my son go that he may serve me, and if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. So he's telling him, this is a warning and even a threat that to the Pharaoh, and he's telling Moses to make sure you tell Pharaoh that if you do not let my son go, which is Israel, I will slay your son. I will kill your firstborn. So this is a matter of war. If the Pharaoh is just, he's telling them these are two different nations. This is Egypt, which is Pharaoh's nation, and this is Israel, which is the Lord's nation. And the Lord's nation, if you do not, if Pharaoh does not relinquish control of Israel, this nation, God is going to say that's an act of war. And if you're going to go to war with me, the first thing, if you go to war with me, I will kill your firstborn. That's God's warning to Pharaoh. This is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. This is the one and only God, the only true power, saying that if you war with me, I'm gonna kill your firstborn. That's the greatest. That's the greatest act of war I probably could think of, I suppose. And that is what the Lord is telling them. This is how severe it is to go to war with the Lord. You will lose your children. That is what God is telling them. That is what war is. And if you go to war with God, I'm going to kill your children, is what God is saying. Your children will die. So we're moving into this kind of strange story here that I'm sure, verse 24 through 26 may seem confusing, but it really isn't. The Lord comes to kill Moses. And here it comes in 20 verse, and it came to pass by the way in the end that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. And then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet and said, surely a bloody husband art thou to me. So he let him go and then said, a bloody husband thou art because of the circumcision. So Zipporah here really has to save the day. Moses was not circumcising his kid. Here he is. Zipporah had to take the sharp stone and look at right here, cut the foreskin of her son. So, and he cast it at his feet and said, surely a bloody husband art thou to me. So it was Zipporah that realized that when the Lord came here came the Lord, and he was coming at the end to kill him. He sought to kill Moses. Here came to pass in the way the Lord met him. So the Lord came once again physically, just as he had fought with, remember when Lord, he didn't fight with him, but he wrestled with Joshua way back when, or not Joshua, but Joseph. Not Joseph either, but Jacob. When he wrestled with Jacob, and Jacob wrestled with him, and he made him bless him. Jacob wouldn't let go of the Lord until the Lord blessed him. Remember? Well, in this instance, here comes the Lord, and it's a very bad situation for Moses, where the Lord was coming to kill him. Here he was coming to kill him. So when the Lord came to meet up with Jacob, way back in Genesis, Jacob was prepared, and Jacob, was willing and ready to fight for the Lord, and he made him bless him because he didn't really know who that guy was, but he knew it was the Lord. It wasn't until afterwards that the Lord did that magic touch on him, that like special where he did put his joint out of place, that supernatural touch. Suddenly did he realize, oh, that was definitely the Lord, for sure. There was something about him, and obviously their meeting must have been kind of understood. But here's another meeting with Moses, and he's wanting, the Lord is trying to kill him. And it was Zipporah that finally realized, oh, it's because you have not, you haven't circumcised our son, and that's why she gets the foreskin and casts it at his feet, and she tells him, surely a bloody husband art thou to me. So she's really upset with Moses too. Look at this. She's like, look, why didn't you tell me, or why didn't we know? Look, God has come, and I'm the one that am understanding. Here it is that God came to meet with you, and he's going to kill you, and you didn't even know. I had to figure it out, and uh, I had to circumcise our son, because if you go back once again in Genesis, and I don't remember what, I got to go through my notes, but Genesis made his covenant with Abraham way back in Genesis, maybe somewhere around Genesis 20, Genesis 15, Genesis 16, 17, 18, something along those lines. He made a real, he said every from now until the end, you're going to be circumcising this line in order to remember the covenant that Abraham made. So these people were supposed to be doing that, and they were not. Clearly, if Moses was forgetting, more than likely a bunch of the other people, a bunch of his other people were forgetting. And here's Zipporah, who is, remember, Midianite, I believe. She's a Midianite. She's from Media, and she's understanding, and she comes across and she realizes, and now she is an a person, and she's now a child of Israel because of her marriage. She's been married into the family, and so now she's really upset with Moses for not keeping up with their laws, and not explaining their laws to her. Probably she doesn't know, she's ignorant, and she's very upset with Moses for being ignorant about it, because she realized that it was about to cost him his life. It was about to cost her husband's life, that she did not know the law. And the law was that they needed to be circumcising their children on their 8th day of their birth. After they've been born 8 days, the boys are supposed to be like that. So that's what's going on here in these particular verses. And it's a little strange to us, perhaps, but it's not strange, because they were supposed to be doing this for the sake of knowing the covenant, and that they're kings. These are going to be kings of people, and here they are acting very lowly. Moses is supposed to be a king over here. Remember, he comes from a line of kings, Abraham and Jacob, and they were all great people. They were very powerful, rich men. Isaac was a rich man. Remember, they were very rich. They were real powerful. They all went out to combat, and they all did crazy, warfare tactics. They were out there, and Moses is just afraid to even go talk to the Pharaoh. He's just, even though he was, he was bad enough to go kill somebody back in Exodus 2. Here he is, not even able to go give a message to the Pharaoh with the Lord's blessing and at the Lord's command. It's a real weak character again. Got another weak character in Moses. And so he let him go. So here's the end of verse 26. So he let him go. Then she said, a bloody husband thou art because of the circumcision. So she's really upset after she circumcises the kid. Like I said, she's just really upset at Moses. Just like God is upset at Moses. Everybody's pretty mad at Moses right about now. Um, and so now we move into verses 27 through 29. Um, when we see that Moses and Aaron gather the elders of Israel. So I guess it's actually, I've been saying it's 29, but it should actually go to the end of the chapter, uh, 31, which is actually verse 31. Let's see. And the Lord said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." And so he went. And he met him in the Mount of God and kissed him. So here's Aaron meeting up with Moses for the first time that we see. And Moses tells Aaron everything that happened. He tells him, "Oh, look, the Lord came and it sent him and all the signs which he commanded him." And Moses and Aaron went and gathered all the elders of the children of Israel. So they go ahead and it kind of cuts to the chase. They get there. Moses goes about and saying, "I gotta talk to everybody, all the elders." And so they go and they talk to them all. And Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken unto Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. So here we are, that just as God had said, Aaron is doing all the speaking. And he did and did the signs inside of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and that he had looked upon their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshiped. So Moses goes and he shows them all his signs, the couple of signs, at least the two signs that we see, and the people believed. And so now they're becoming. I'll suddenly remember, if you remember, um, uh, that they were starting to become really afflicted. And we read in Exodus 1 that the Egypt was, they were beginning, that there was a new Pharaoh and he didn't know anything about Joseph and them. He didn't know anything about the history of the Israel people, the people of Israel, and how Joseph had saved all of the people of Egypt way back when. So he instead had just become to started to deal harshly with these children of Israel. He said, he's just going to deal hard with them. And so they were starting to be worked pretty aggressively at this point. And so that's why God he had seen their affliction. He had heard their affliction. He had come to them. And so that's why here at the end of Exodus 4, the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and that he had looked upon their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshiped. So they were real amazed that God had come and he had heard about all the bad things that were happening to them and how Pharaoh was mistreating them. And they were real grateful, and they were real astounded that this is that kind of God that compared to the other gods who you will come across, and if you know anything about pagan gods, you know that most of them are real aggressive, real violent. They require all kinds of human sacrifices, and they're real evil, and they're real, if you don't do things for them, they'll do bad things to you. Well, we're seeing that here God is coming to them precisely because uh, they're being mistreated. And here he is mad at their leadership for not knowing what's going on. And Moses is going to basically act as their leadership, and he is the symbol for their leadership. And that is what we're seeing here, is that the people are seeing the sight, and they're seeing and realizing that God has come to us precisely because we're being afflicted. And we even see that our leaders and their signs are very symbolic, that the leadership is in bad straits. They don't know, they're having to pick up a snake here, and their hands are having to get leprous and dirty, and they are being restored by the Lord. So that is what's going on, and that's what they're seeing, that these signs of their elders coming from Moses, that things are getting pretty rough. They're having to deal with snakes. They're having to deal with serpents, and their hands are getting leprous, and God is restoring them in the face of Pharaoh. So that is Exodus 4. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. So I'll go ahead and say, once again, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future chapter by chapter Bible study. And God bless you to anyone who may be watching this. I pray that we bless Jesus Christ, and may Jesus Christ bless all of us. Amen.